Good afternoon and good morning to those of you that have joined us from overseas. We'll just give it sort of 30 seconds to a minute just to let other people join. Just give it a few more seconds and then we'll start. Okay, so thank you for joining today's symposium. The impact of COVID-19 on the payroll outsourcing market and the importance of digitisation for payroll processing. So today I'm delighted to say that Amedis has joined us. But before we start, let's go over some housekeeping. Okay, so we want this to be an interactive session. So at the end of today's session, we'll have the chance to speak to you and answer any questions. So please share your questions in the Q&A box. Can you please avoid sharing them in the chat box? So just add them to the Q&A box, please. The session is recorded and will be shared over the next few days. And also the slides will be made available to you. So I hope you really enjoy today. Okay, so today's agenda, we're going to meet the panel, have learn a bit about TMF Group, talk about the impact of COVID in the payroll outsourcing market, turning payroll operations digital, human experience powered by technology, and as I said, the Q&A session. So before we start, let's meet the panel. So Adele, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, my name's Adele Ewing. Nice to meet you all. I'm the Global Head of HR and Payroll Solutions at TMF Group. I've been in role now for approximately 6 months. Prior to that, I've spent a number of years at NGA in a UK local role, plus then moving on to several global roles. And then prior to that, worked at BDO in very much focused around payroll outsourcing. So nice to meet you all and look forward to presenting today and working with you on the Q&A section at the end.
Thanks, Adele. And Gary, over to you.
Yep, sure. Thanks, Mel. Hi, everyone. My name's Gary Wright. I head up HR and Payroll Solutioning for TMF. I've been with TMF for about 5 years now. My background is in HR and payroll. I've worked in the industry for somewhere in the region of about 35 years. And for the last 15 years, I've been focused on global solutioning for payroll opportunities for large client organizations. And similar to Adele, I've worked around the industry as well. I used to be, before coming to TMF, I used to head up HR and payroll solutioning for HP. I've also worked at Ceridian and CGI, etc. So really pleased to be here today. Looking forward to presenting our understandings and what we found out about the impact of COVID, and also taking any questions later on. So thanks for the opportunity to present.
Thanks, Gary, and over to James.
Thanks, Melanie. Hi, everyone. I'm James Bertioli. I lead our digital operations and regional delivery centre teams across the group. Really, my role is working with the likes of Adele, Gary, and our delivery teams to try and make things better for our clients and better for our employees. So that really sees us deploying different technologies, better process standards, and also trying to embed a digital culture into the business. So what we'll be sharing a bit later on is our digital journey, where we are and where we're looking to head to. So I look forward to sharing some ideas and also receiving your questions.
Thanks, James. And as you can see, my name is obviously Melanie Pitsey, and I'm CEO of the Global Payroll Association and been working within the payroll industry for 23 years. So let's go on to the agenda, and I'm going to pass this over to Adele, where she is going to tell you a little bit more about TMF Group.
Okay, thanks, Mel. So I'll be very brief around the introductory to TMF because I'm conscious we have a number of clients on the call, and I'm hoping most of you have heard of us in the marketplace. We can focus more attention around the content of the two presentations. But at a very high level, who are we at TMF Group? We're approximately nearly 8,000 experts, largely based in local countries, as we feel it's still very important, even in today's world, to have that local expertise. We're very focused on compliance and controls, and that's evident in our ISAE processes. We've been working fairly closely with a number of analysts since I've been in role. So we're rated as a global leader and star performer in the latest report from Everest. We've got a large number of clients. Those clients can vary from a local small client to a large global. And we've evolved our client base, especially over the last 3 years. But we are focused very much on the both ends of the spectrum. I suppose the last point to make around TMF Group is that we are a professional services company. We've got 3 core corporate lines. One of them is payroll, and we work very closely with my colleagues in accounting and tax and company secretarial. And in all of those service lines, we see it as a service. So technology is very important to us, but it's seen as an enabler to provide a service alongside people and process. And then the next slide, it just gives you a flavour of where we are based. So you will see that we actually have a huge network of our own offices, and we're not in every location, but we try to minimise the number of locations where we need to depend on a subcontractor. So we see this as a unique selling point. We have less than 10% of our coverage provided by subcontractors. And again, it reiterates the point around us feeling that you do need that local presence to deliver the right service, especially around complex matters. Okay, so I will move into the far more interesting part around the content of the 2 sessions. So firstly, we will be talking to you around the impact of COVID-19. I will be covering the first piece, which is around managing payroll in a pandemic. And then Gary will be covering the 2 agenda points around delivery impactors and challenges and the long-term impact of COVID-19. So before we go into the presentation, I'm going to hand to Mel, who's going to be giving us an opportunity to do a poll, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Talking about my technology again, aren't you?
No.
Okay, so let's launch this. So how difficult is it to stay compliant with changes in payroll legislations caused by the COVID-19 pandemic? So I'm just going to launch this poll now. And there we have extremely difficult, difficult, slightly difficult, reasonably easy, not difficult at all. So Adele, what do you think is going to be the top one on this one?
Do I want to hedge my bet before we get the answers? I will say difficult.
So we're just trying to get over 75% of you, please. So we're nearly there. So we just need a few more of you to vote, if possible. We definitely have an outstanding answer on this one. Okay, just a few more seconds, please. Okay, so I'm going to close this poll. Can you see the results? We have 17% extremely difficult, 56 difficult, 17% slightly difficult, 9% reasonably easy, and 2% not difficult at all. Can you see those, Adele?
Yes, I can see them.
Yeah.
So where you're trying to say that I was right. My guess is
yes, you're right. Okay, I'm going to hide the results then for you.
Okay, brilliant, thanks. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, thanks, Yvonne. Right, so earlier in the year, a number of months ago, we worked with the American Payroll Association and did a fairly lengthy survey around COVID-19 and how the market was feeling around the impact. So we wanted to just spend a few minutes giving you some insight into some of the key findings from that survey. We're feeling that this is a true representative of what people think globally, not just the US. So I think the first point to know is, in light of COVID-19, where some industries unfortunately have stopped or slowed down, in the world of payroll, I think everyone would agree that it's probably been the busiest time that we have ever been, and that's largely linked to where we've got changes in regulations, where governments have tried to provide the necessary support in such a difficult financial climate, which means for those on the front line, it's been a real difficult time. And you can see from the results on the right hand side that compliance and keeping up with all those changes, as well as continuing with normal payroll service. People need to get paid on time and accurate regardless of their economic circumstances. So to be fair, a huge credit to everyone in the payroll world and our employees, where that not only have they worked harder than they've probably ever worked before, they've also worked in much probably more difficult circumstances where whether you're in-house or outsourced, traditionally those payroll delivery teams have been very much office-based and working next to each other in a team environment. So at the bottom it says just over a fifth admitted to an increase in payroll errors. I don't want to debate on whether that's a acceptable number, but that has been a challenge with all the changes in legislation to be able to keep up to date and to make sure that there isn't any errors. I think I've seen personally through this pandemic a real people focus, that actually delivery hasn't been impacted in terms of quality to a significant or material scale, but that doesn't take away the challenge that each one of us have been facing during this pandemic. Okay, and then this is just a few more details and key insights from the survey that we did. And I've referenced just a second ago around the managing new ways of working. I think this pandemic has given everyone to probably the opportunity to reflect on how we deliver services and where from. That's going to be something that's going to be a key agenda point in the coming 12-18 months as we get back to normal. I think we'll all go, what is normal now in a payroll delivery world? Again, to the right hand side and the bottom, change in legislation and keeping up to date has been a massive challenge, and being able to get that information may have been a struggle as well, due to the amount of change and the frequency of change in some jurisdictions. That those changes happened every month, so it's really key maybe for us as outsource providers to consider how we can make that data more readily accessible, and in the in-house teams to know where to go to make sure that they are compliant and we make it as easy as possible. And then if I go to the top left around business risk, sorry Yvonne, where I think the new ways of working is something to focus on, but it's all been hands at the deck to deliver payroll services. So I think working efficiently may have taken a back seat during this pandemic in certain circumstances. So how we reignite that and make sure that we become as efficient as possible. And this leads to the second agenda point that we have with James later on during the day. Okay, and lastly, I just wanted to think about in-house challenges. So I do think payroll teams in-house probably have had a bigger challenge than maybe the outsource companies. That's fairly general statement. I think some companies will have very small teams, may have single points of failure, trying to keep up with changing legislation. It's probably been more challenging than those payroll teams sitting in an outsource environment where there are larger teams with support. So it's just an acknowledgement during this presentation that all of us have faced challenges, but potentially the challenges within a payroll department within a company may have been more significant. Okay, and now I'm going to hand over to Gary to deliver the 2 remaining points of the agenda for this presentation.
Okay, thanks Adele for that. So I'm going to maybe extend some of this a bit further, and I'm going to talk about 2 things, which is the impact of COVID-19 from a delivery perspective and the challenges that it's brought, and also maybe what the long-term effects are in relation to COVID. And I think Adele has kind of laid the path in relation maybe to what some of those are going to be. But if we look at things from a delivery perspective, and we think about ourselves as being an outsourcer and delivering payrolls on behalf of our clients, what I see is kind of 6 key themes that probably resonate with most of you on this call, if you're delivering services on behalf of your clients, or even if you are an organization that's gone through the pandemic. But the first thing that we found is that payroll is all about a process, and it's about processing the gross to net. That actual process begins obviously with the provision of data to enable the payroll processing to actually take place. And we certainly found in the first couple of months in relation to the pandemic, when we were processing payrolls on behalf of our clients, that some of them were having problems in actually getting the data that we need to be able to feed to payroll. So for example, the HR master data, time and attendance files, commissions and bonuses, etc. So there was an internal struggle there. So we've had to work very closely with our clients to understand exactly what those challenges are, and maybe to be more flexible in relation to the the timeline and the milestones that we have from a payroll processing cycle. And even to the point where for some of our clients, we've had to step over to the other side of the fence and maybe have some of our resources work with them to enable the production of that data for us as well. So flexibility is a key message there. The other one is basically touching on what we did from the poll from the first part of the presentation that Adele was talking to, which is the changes to legislation impacting payroll calculation. So as a global supplier of payroll, obviously we're delivering payroll in 144 countries. So we're cognizant that legislation is changing on a regular basis, and at some point for some countries at the beginning of the pandemic, it was changing on a daily basis as well. So we found ourselves in the position whereby we'd actually processed a payroll for a client, and payment was due to employees within the next couple of working days, but legislation had then changed in the interim. So we've had to be nimble in some instances where we may have had to rerun payrolls, or in other instances where we've had to then make sure that our payroll applications, legislation parameters are changed. We process the payroll the next period, and then we have to do a reconciliation to make sure that we actually come up with the right cumulative figures for our clients as well. So again, from a statutory perspective, one of the, I suppose, the positive aspects of the pandemic is that in relation to statutory filing deadlines, a lot of governments have realised that that's obviously going to be challenging for a number of organisations. So there has been a relaxation a little bit maybe of some of the deadlines and when payments, for example, have to be made for the likes of tax and social security. So again, at TMF, we understand this because obviously we deliver services in country with our own teams. So our teams are very close to the changes that excuse me, that are going on from a legislation perspective. We're advising our clients in relation to that as well. So therefore, it's interesting because we advise clients about, for example, they don't have to release funds on a certain day. There may be a kind of a longer grace period for them to keep funds in their business. And again, that's been something that our clients have really appreciated as well, that kind of candor and knowledge that we're bringing to them from a local level. Adele addressed the resourcing challenges as well, so that's obviously been something that equally has affected a number of people from a pandemic. So that's impacted ourselves, and that's also impacted our clients as well. So everyone is needing to be creative in relation to making sure that the resources are available to actually deliver payroll. And again, as I said earlier, if we are aware of situations where our clients are struggling from a resourcing perspective to actually fulfill some of the tasks that are standard within the payroll processing cycle, then we have offered assistance and people to help with that process as well. So it's all about that level of flexibility. And then finally, if we look at payments to both employees and third parties, then again, that is really something that is absolutely crucial. I mean, we are very proud at TMF. We didn't miss any paydays in relation to COVID, but we have had to do things in a different way on some occasions, and some of that has been, you know, changes to circumstances to our clients as well, where we've had to fulfill payment and treasury services to our clients that they would normally undertake themselves. So normally our responsibility would be the production of a bank file. In some instances, our clients have not then been able to process the bank file. So they've said to us, can you deliver treasury services on our behalf? So very quickly, within a very short period of time, we've had to step in again and actually make those payments on behalf of the clients, whether that be, you know, accessing their own accounts through POA or potentially setting up trust accounts, whatever. We've had to do that as well. So again, it kind of goes back to the flexibility. So, you know, those are the key 6 things I think that have really impacted the delivery. And from our perspective, it's certainly made us think about our operational delivery in a different way. So if we move on, I think the next 2 slides are really just reiterating those points that I've gone through in relation to those things. So they will be available obviously after the call. So I'm not going to go through those, but if we can then move to, you know, what are going to be the impacts of COVID from a long-term perspective. If we can move to the next slide. Again, I think Adele covered some of these points. What does it mean for us as a payroll supplier, you know, after COVID-19? It's obvious that this pandemic has really stretched us from a BCP perspective, and not only ourselves, but also, you know, our clients as well. We've had to think about different ways of working, with people now working more from home. And again, it's fascinating because obviously if this pandemic would have struck 5 years ago, I think it would be a very different situation. But certainly from us, from a TMF perspective, because we have workflow now, we have cloud-based solutions, it enables us to be able to adroitly then, you know, get our resources to work maybe remotely to be able to deliver payroll. So again, I think that's something that has certainly tested us, and from a BCP perspective, it's made us certainly look and evaluate our own processes as well. We've also spoke about compliance as well. So again, our delivery model at TMF is focused on delivering payrolls locally as well. So we are in the fortunate position that our resources absolutely know what is going on from a legislative perspective, very close to all of the statutory organisations, making sure that our payroll systems are compliant. But ultimately, it also then comes down to communication as well, and actually talking to our clients and informing them of what some of the impacts could be on their own employees as well. So again, making sure that if we are in a situation where we're having to make some very rapid changes because of statutory changes, and we're reconciling that, making sure that our clients are aware of what the implications could be so they can communicate that to their employees as well. Adele also mentioned that from a TMF perspective, we're a service-orientated organisation, and we use technology effectively. And James will certainly cover that when we talk about the digitisation that we're bringing into our delivery model. But again, technology itself isn't going to save the day. Payroll is I think Giles said this last week when he was doing his evaluation. He thought payroll was about numbers, but the more he kind of read into it, it was more about people. And it is. Great technology enables us to communicate more effectively. It gives us the ability to do things, and has certainly given us the ability to get through this pandemic. But from a delivery perspective, working closely with our clients, and reacting to the situations that they're in, whether that be resourcing or whether that be a shortfall in, being able to make payments to their employees, etc., is absolutely key. So it's certainly made us also enhance maybe our method of the way that we interact with our clients on a regular basis. And again, that leads to flexibility as well. So I've just mentioned a couple of examples there about the way that at TMF we've had to, nimbly change things to meet a solution that our clients have found themselves into. It could be payments, it could be not being able to actually get the data to us. So we are very conscious of a huge amount of flexibility that we've had to show over the last 8 or 9 months. And again, this has been recognised by our clients as well, because as a payroll supplier, there is nothing more important than getting your clients' employees paid as well. I think the other thing that we're going to see as a result of COVID-19 is that it's certainly highlighted maybe to a number of organisations that the traditional way of working in relation to teams or locations is going to change. I think people are going to be looking now to enable the best resources that they can to work within their organisations, and maybe the actual location of that resource is primarily secondary. So we're going to see many teams within their organisations where they've got folks working in different countries, in different regions as well. But importantly, we're going to see people maybe traveling and working in different regions. I mean, my team, for example, is multi-jurisdiction, and a number of the people that work for me are not actually native within that country. So therefore, I can see maybe more uptake from a global mobility perspective. So again, at TMF, we offer that service, and it's certainly something that we are building into our model moving forwards as well, because we recognise that that's something our clients are going to want to see. And then the final thing for me is what Adele mentioned about the in-country delivery teams as well. I think that coming out of COVID, a number of our clients are going to be looking at the shape of their retained organisation to see, is it the most effective way that they will work? Because essentially, again, COVID has forced us to reevaluate the way that we look at processes, not only from within TMF, but also our clients as well. So they will be looking to restructure the way that they work and their actual setup as well. So again, those are what I see as the 6 key impacts coming out of COVID. So it's been a very difficult time, but again, it may be the catalyst for some very different ways of working as well. So at that point, I'm going to stop, and I think, Adele, I'm going to hand back to yourself.
Yep, thanks, Gary. Okay, right, so we're going to move into the second content session for the next 20 or so minutes, and it's talking about turning payroll operations digital. So James is going to be presenting most of the context, but before we go to James, I thought it would just be worth us thinking about why this is becoming more relevant, especially on the back of the pandemic. So if you look to the right hand side, we've just listed out some drivers why we have no choice other than to digitalise our offering, whether we're in-house or whether we're outsourced providers. So driving down cost is probably going to be more critical than ever, especially for those industries that have been heavily impacted by the pandemic. So hopefully, looking at some of the technologies that James is going to go through in a moment will give us some insight on potential ways on how we can drive down cost and become more efficient. I would say whatever business you're in, the expectations as a client, as a customer, continually are heightened each year. So we cannot be complacent around our service offering that, continually each year it needs to improve. And we're seeing, with the global client base, there is a real need for consistency. Doesn't matter which even provider you're using or which offices or what payroll software, there needs to be a consistent offering and some aggregator, so there is one view across the globe. And there are some digital tools that enable us to do that. From an employee perspective, it's really critical that the employee experience is great. So getting them to do manual work all the time just isn't great satisfaction. So moving to a more digital world is not necessarily a threat. It's an enabler for our team to be able to do more value added activities that in the past have probably not got to, because they're manually taking their time at doing the actual processing. And then if we think about return on investment when you're doing business cases and looking to potentially move from an in-house to outsource, you need to be able to have a return on investment. So there is always a driver around cost to make it work, that we as providers need to keep our costs down. And I suppose that just lastly on this slide is to just think about who this impacts. This is relevant to, hopefully you will agree through this presentation, whether you're an in-house team, whether you're an outsourcer, whether it's multi, it's local country, whether you deliver on or offshore. This whole topic of turning payroll operations digital, we believe is relevant to everyone. So hopefully you'll get some insight as we go through some of the things that we've been doing at TMF to turn our payroll operations digital. Okay, over to Mel for the technicalities of the poll.
Okay, great. Thank you, Adele. Let's launch this. So what's your biggest payroll priority for 2021? Cost reduction, process improvement, compliance and data security, better payroll experience, access to better technology. So let's launch the poll. I'm going to ask you again, Adele, what do you think is going to be the winner on this one?
Yeah, this is a more difficult one, actually. I'm going to say process improvement, just based on my discussions with the analysts to date. But again, I think it depends on the audience and the attendees, because people will have different priorities. So maybe I'll be proved wrong here, but I'm not sure there's going to be a clear winner.
You're actually quite right. There is, well, it's a bit more. Well, actually now it's changing. I'm going to shut up now because I feel like I'm changing it now.
Completely wrong this time.
Okay, so we just need a few more people to answer, so just a couple more seconds, please. Okay, we'll just leave it. Sorry, Adele, we'll just leave it a few more seconds. I'd just like to get a certain amount of people to answer, so we get a good answer. So it has actually changed since we've been talking. So I'm going to close the poll now, and I will reveal the results. Okay, so we have 5% cost reduction, 52% process improvement. So I think that's what you said, wasn't it, Adele? So you're right.
Yeah.
19% compliance and data security, 7% better payroll experience, and 17% access to better technology. So the one result that makes me happy there is the cost of reduction. So that's definitely an improvement at only 5%. So that's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So I'll hide these results and I will go on mute.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a link here. So I've got this slide before I hand over to James. So I just wanted to give you some insight into the view from Everest from their numerous surveys and discussions in the marketplace. So using the content to the top left, top payroll objectives on the back of the pandemic. It's around digitalisation, it's around standardisation, centralisation, and the topic of business continuity is obviously still very hot on the journey that everyone's been through over the last few months. And then in terms of what's stopping us from digitalising, there is a huge amount of limitations in legacy systems. I can see that personally across TMF in the local solutions and what the local market software opportunities are. It really differs between different locations. Interestingly enough, cost reduction is higher here, and the regulatory changes again is really aligned to the COVID-19 discussions that we had earlier on. So further down into the right, you'll see some data points here which is aligned to the poll, and that's why you'll probably see where I came through on the process improvement. So in comparison to previous years, that's a real driver for companies when they look at potential outsource providers. You'll see that compliance and data security is really important, but it's always been important. And I suppose going back to my TMF hat on, domain expertise is really valuable, especially on the back of the pandemic and continuous changes in regulation. That availability and access to people is really critical. You'll see there's not been much changes during the year on some of these drivers. A fairly bigger improvement, I suppose, in the insights and analytics, where people are requiring that to be part of a critical service, or we can see certain clients may be asking for data downloads that they can use in their warehouse. So again, that's becoming more of a need. But I think a bit surprising that it's, even though there's a lot of talk around the need around insights and analytics, it doesn't take away the priority around the core principles around compliance, domain regulation, and process improvement. So I'm going to hand over to James now, who will just give you a flavour of how within TMF digital has become more part of our payroll operations as we look to improve the service to our clients.
Excellent, thank you, Adele. So really the aim of the next 10 minutes then is to share a bit of what we've been doing in TMF around digital, and try and provide some ideas, some thought provokers that hopefully each of you can reflect on how that can be applied in your in-house payroll team, your service provider. I would love to spend 1, 2, 3 hours on the topic, so cramming this into 10 minutes is tough, but please bear with me, and hopefully it will give you some ideas for what could be done within your world. So really, when we think about digital transformation, the natural starting point is technology, but within TMF we've really tried to start with our people. So for me, people are our employees, but also our clients. How do we make life better for clients? How do we make life better for the people delivering payroll every day across our 80 jurisdictions? Now, obviously, we want to equip these people with technology. And the key thing here is finding the right technology for the solution or the problem that we're faced with. So that there is not some killer technology that solves everything, and it's being agile, it's being practical, and equipping our people with the right technology, and really creating what we're calling a digital resource. So for me, that digital resource is a person with the right mindset, the right culture, and the right technology to drive a better outcome for our clients. Now, starting with people gives a different flavor to then how we follow this through. And for me, what's key in our digital strategy is that it's not technology led, it's very much people, and some of the traditional improvement techniques we continue to push and drive across the group. So when we think about our strategy, we've got a basic framework that really builds from some traditional methods up into some more forward thinking and radical changes. So when we think about this, the local foundations, any payroll department needs to be built on strong foundations. So we need clear controls, clear processes, really clear organizational structure and who's doing what, clarity of the right person with the right skill doing the right work. Our managers and our payroll leaders need to know how to manage effectively. So in terms of team management, exception management, and then moving across into the lean management kind of world. So actually we spend a lot of time, a lot of money equipping our managers to know how to leverage lean management, because that way, that I think in the previous slide, the number one topic was improve processes. This works when people embrace that lean methodology and take on board that need to improve the processes themselves. So we'll go into a bit more detail about that in a later slide. With the local foundations in place, we then look at some technology enablement. So every payroll operation needs a payroll engine. So we need to ensure we've got delivery applications that are localized, are compliant, are supported, etc. It would be great if everyone could have the latest application at all times. Clearly, again, in a previous slide, the legacy applications is a challenge. So we need to make sure that what we have is understood and then also kind of complemented by other tech. So Gary mentioned we're in the process of rolling out workflow. So there is a lot of investment being made in getting these standard processes equipped to manage through workflow, so we can see where each step is in the process, who's doing what. Again, more information to follow. We then have delivery backbone. So this is kind of a global wraparound on what we're delivering locally. For us at TMF, that's our Horizon platform that I'm sure Gary and Adele can share more information on. On top of that, we've then got automation. So we're then moving up the pyramid. So we've got basic process automation. So for me, that's the likes of RPA, data automation, the use of, there's various stuff in the Microsoft product now that are kind of inbuilt automations, and then moving across to more AI and cognitive type automation that again can help with decision making, predictions, etc. And then finally, in TMF, whilst we're still very strongly local delivery, that there are elements where clients are demanding regional delivery centres, a more centralised model, and that there is part of that strategy. So we maintain focus on local needs, local compliance. However, in certain instances, we're seeing that this digital strategy can enable us to also use RDCs in certain instances. Now, as I mentioned, I'd love to spend many hours discussing this with you, but for the purpose of today, I'm going to focus on a couple of things at each layer and share a bit about what we're doing. So from the local foundations piece, it's really tying in the processes into a workflow tool. So this has been a real game changer for us, and getting processes embedded in a workflow where everything is either a scheduled activity, so a case that follows a process, or a ticket where we've got emails are flowing in and we're categorizing that and responding. It gives our operations a really clear view that we're following the standard process. We are embedding controls at each step. There's no paperwork flying between. It's all embedded in this workflow tool. And what it also gives us is a huge amount of data analytics into what our people are doing. So this has been a huge step forward in digitizing our processes and having that data available to see where we are, what's going on, and who's doing what. Particularly in the world of COVID, the need for BCP. If someone goes off ill, if someone has an emergency, you can instantly see what they're working on, reallocate, and manage the work in a really agile way. So it really helps address some of those priorities that you've seen, I think, from the Everest slide earlier on. So what this workflow tool does, you see here, it then ties up to the top right-hand corner around lean management and people management. The workflow tool enables us to have a series of data items that can then feed into daily lean huddles, which have again been a really good way to connect people, albeit virtually at the moment. We did have nice big visual boards in the office, but we're now having digital huddles, but we're getting people talking through metrics, through their calendars, and really reviewing where are we, what's the priority, how do we push this forward and work in an effective way. In addition to that, the daily huddles stimulate the team-based problem solving. So the number one in our survey there was the need for process improvement. In the huddles, teams are motivated to share their issues, to share their problems, and they work through that to see how do we improve that as a team and make it better. In addition to that, we've got a structured week. So a really interesting thing we've seen is that, again, whether this is payroll, accounting, or to be honest, any part of the business, our calendars tend to get filled up with more and more meetings, particularly in the world of COVID. One of the big things we've pushed is the concept of a structured week, and realistically a structured month. So you look through your calendar, you look through your requirements, and really define what meetings happen when, who's attending them, how do we make sure they're effective meetings. And that's a great way of removing ineffective time across the payroll teams. So there's a huge amount of stuff we're doing in this world of lean. There's a number of lean black belts throughout the organization, and they're then coaching the HRP practitioners to really leverage these tools and new ways of working. This here is a sample output from our workflow tool. We start to look at timeliness, defects, reworks. The data and insight it gives you on your payroll operation is just exceptional. That there's no manual KPI creation. We can see what's failing where, what's client driven versus what is TMF driven. So actually, one of the really useful things we're getting from this is having really fact-based, data-driven discussions with clients, so that frustrations on both sides can be understood, and we can really build out and work on that relationship. So again, data and insight really helped by the workflow tool, and what we have kind of wrapped around this pyramid is a data and insight strategy. So our data and insight team are utilizing Power BI, other data tools as well to try and bring increased visibility within country, cross country with a client. It's really powerful stuff. The final thing that I want to share today is around automation. So I wanted to try and bring this to life a little bit and kind of share what we're doing. As I mentioned up front, technology does not solve the day, and I think that is never more proven than the world of automation. If you read all the Gump on their internet sites, and if you read all of some of the platforms that are being sold now, it's kind of, there's this payroll utopia that's out there, but who needs people when you've just got the perfect technology? I've not seen it. I don't think it exists in that perfect world. So what I want to do is kind of talk you through some of the basic foundations that I think any payroll office, any payroll team will have to work with. Share the payroll utopia that is supposedly out there. Share with you a bit of payroll inferno. So what does a bad situation look like, and then really talk through how we're applying some medicine within our world of TMF. So when we look at this book, again, this is a very simplified view of the world, but please bear with me. So when we look at a payroll operation, we need a payroll engine. Payroll engine is going to be there to do the calculations, ideally create some reports off the back of it, and various other things. That payroll engines can be from 0 to 100, right? There's a huge variability in what an engine does. Obviously, off the back of that, there's going to be some exception management, and really the aim is end-to-end, reduce the number of exceptions and manual intervention that we need. So the utopian view of the world is we've got some fantastic HR systems where every piece of data is correct, it's seamlessly managed, and then integrated into the engine. The engine does everything you need and more, perfectly localized, automated reviews, automated outputs, and frankly, exceptions should be very minimum. in this ideal world of perfect data, perfect process, it's for me a dream. It'd be lovely to get there, but that there is the utopia, right? I think some of the realities that many of us may be experiencing is the payroll inferno. So from a payroll inferno perspective, lots of manual HR data sources, stuff flying around in image, text, Excel, you name it, which then causes a lot of manual data prep. So people doing manual work, data prep, data upload, all right for time-consuming activities, all right for manual error. That then goes into the engine, requiring lots of manual reviews, potential rework and back through, creation of manual outputs. That really is a cumbersome, heavy process that obviously as a payroll manager, you want to try and reduce as many of the red boxes. Now, when we look at how do we move away from red, what we've started to look at within TMF is a range of technologies and a range of kind of hotspots that we try to automate. So really we've got, how do we take disparate data sources and automate the data preparation? That there is a key tool we're using here is Alteryx, really effective tool, really user-friendly, where we can map disparate data sources and into a standard upload file. Depending on the engine and the file type, we can either automate that through Alteryx or UiPath into the engine. Again, depending on the maturity of the engine, we're also supplementing that with some RPA type work to do some of the data moving that happens within that. Again, automated reviews, a range of different things we're piloting and deploying at the moment with different technologies. And then outputs, if the engine cannot create the output, again, Alteryx is really effective at taking data outputs and mapping it to a different output that's needed. So that's kind of the utopia, the inferno, and the medicine. The realistic view of the world is that a complete end-to-end of blue, red, or green doesn't tend to exist. And what we've seen is as we're applying these medicines, that there's different routes through, depending on the client mix, depending on the payroll software. So this here is, again, very different views, very different routes. And it's the key thing is picking the right tools, identifying the right opportunities to make things better. So that's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour. For me, key learnings, number one, digital behaviors are more important than technology. If you don't have people that are willing to embrace digital, think differently, challenge the status quo, the tech's not going to solve the world. You need the process fundamentals, so the basis of standard process, control, lean management is essential. It's definitely not dead in the digital age, and actually digital helps to embed that. Really tackle the source of the problem. So when you look at that payroll flow, and this probably links nicely to number 4, the payroll data is key. All the stuff to the right-hand side, if you don't solve your payroll data, if you don't tackle the source of the problem, the digital transformation is not going to be effective. And finally, that there is no silver bullet. I'm sure many of you on the call are playing around with digital at the moment as well. That there really is not a silver bullet. But the good news is there's lots of digital medicines, and the key thing is to try them, test them, and see what works for you, because there is not a single answer. So I hope that was useful. I hope that gives some food for thought, and I will hand back to Melanie, I think, for some Q&A.
Yeah, thanks a lot, James. That was really interesting. So we've got a couple of questions to start off with regarding the impacts of COVID-19 in the payroll outsourcing market. We have a question on that, and it is, with the payroll function being even more important than before, do you see payroll salaries increasing above the rate of inflation? Who would like to answer that, Adele or Gary?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So I agree on the point that I think the pandemic has raised the profile of payroll, whether you're in-house supporting your business or even outsourcing and you're doing providing multiple service lines. You know, people have to get paid, and you know, people are definitely more valued, I think, where they might have been not neglected, that's probably the wrong word, but you take it as happened. Very similar to what I would say the technology department, a support function. You know, none of us would be able to do anything with the fantastic work that they've done during this time. So I agree on the point about valued. Does that necessarily mean people will be paid more and get pay rises? I don't think there's one answer on that one. I think with the pandemic, some industries have been heavily impacted, that there might be no pay rises whatsoever, but if companies are able to make pay increases, I would hope that companies would award those to the payroll team, technology teams, and give them the credit that they're due. But again, I think it's very specific to every company, industry, but I agree fundamentally on the point that it has raised the awareness and profile of the payroll team.
If I can add to that, if I may as well, I think what we're seeing is that maybe there could be a bit of a shift because of the things that we spoke about in relation to legislation. There probably does need to be a higher level of local expertise in understanding and interpreting the changes to legislation. So maybe where before some organisations have gone down the road of actually looking at shared service centres and very much a process orientated kind of approach, the actual need for expertise and understanding the impact of legislation, I think, will increase again post-COVID as well. So I can see that kind of knowledge level probably increasing as well within the role.
We've actually just had somebody put on chat that they feel like their team have done an excellent job, and I feel that's a common theme, isn't it, during sort of throughout the whole of the payroll industry, that everyone's worked very hard.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
okay. Oh, sorry, Adele.
And I do think maybe with that value, naturally companies might invest more in such functions that they haven't previously. And we know, from an outsourcing perspective, the market's pretty competitive. And I would have thought it would be pretty competitive now, given that the skills needed and people looking at the business continuity, that that value might necessarily mean naturally that the salaries paid before may not be the same as the salaries needed to perform that function going forward.
Okay, just going on to the next question. What do you see as the major impact of COVID from a payroll legislation and compliance perspective? Gary, is that for you?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Mel. I think that what we're seeing is that there needs to be an understanding that legislation is going to be changing rapidly. Obviously, it's changed significantly during the period of the pandemic, but I think as organisations and government agencies move into a world post the pandemic, then I think there has to be a number of changes in relation to the impacts of people from a well-being perspective as well. So I think that this has kind of enabled that to happen. So one of the things that we're certainly looking at is well-being solutions and stuff like that. And I think that potentially there's going to be a change in statutory requirements in relation to maybe things like being able to take leave and medical leave, etc., and enhancing that kind of benefit provision, but through statutory obligations of increased leave and stuff like that. So I think it's going to continue, Mel. I think we're in a period where we're going to see a significant amount of change probably for the next couple of years.
Okay. Yeah, there's been sort of over 400 legislation changes, hasn't there, over the last couple of months, so it definitely will carry on. Okay, James, this is for you. You said one of the key learnings was around digital behaviours. What does that mean in the context of a payroll delivery team?
Sure. So I think it's really interesting because for me, a big part of digital is challenging the status quo. I'm kind of working in that agile, quick, iterative mentality. And I think within the world of payroll, lots of people are trained to be accurate, consistent, spot on, because that's what we're paid to be doing, right? So it's giving people the space to fail. And obviously we can't fail in the payroll processing itself, but outside of that live environment, getting people thinking about how do we improve, how do we make things better, and giving them the space to have that creativity outside of the core payroll, because we cannot mess up the core payroll. But it's all around being agile, testing stuff, learning, and just pushing the boundary a bit, because I think there's so much that can be done now. It's giving people that headspace to think outside the box.
Thank you. And how has the digital transformation impacted your clients?
So I think it's been overwhelmingly positive. I think the stuff we're doing, clients tend to really enjoy hearing about what's going on, and then they start to see the improvements. So stuff like responsiveness, timeliness, and the ability to have more data and insight into what's going on the ground. I think it really helps to build the relationship. So it's not only the service they get, but that data and insight really helps how we work together. So I think also what's interesting is that everyone loves digital until they realize it might have to impact the way in which they work. So I would say one of the key learnings for us has been as well that we need to bring clients and people along with us, because even if digital make things better, it always leads to some form of impact on the BAU way of working. So that's also been quite interesting to make sure clients are aware of any change and how that impacts them, but be clear on the benefit. And as I said, the benefits are really coming through.
Yeah, and just to add to that, in terms of the analytics, it's really helpful for us as a provider, but it also helps the client understand where potentially they may have some issues from their end. So if we're being supplied incorrect data, if we're having to deliver draft payroll runs, multiple times that they're going to need to check, all those things add up on a client's end as well. So those data insights have not only just helped us, but actually working with the client to get a better end-to-end.
Okay, thank you. Okay, another question. We're currently reviewing our current software. Do you have any advice or a tool to help go through this process? Gary, are you able to answer this one?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that, Mel. I'm not quite sure if there is a tool that's available to help assess, but I mean, my recommendation is to certainly engage maybe some of the analysts to help you navigate that path as well, and maybe speak to someone like a systems integrator. And also, I would say, have a very clear vision of what you actually want to get as your objective. I mean, for some organizations, it can be a combined HR and payroll solution, but maybe for some it's a case of investing in maybe some really heavy hitting HRIS technology such as Workday or SAP SuccessFactors or Oracle, etc., and then thinking about how you actually join that to what you want from a payroll solution. And organizations and payroll suppliers are now very mature in actually working with organizations that are investing in all of that HRIS tooling. But the key thing really is to have a very clear vision of how you want your model to operate from a whole TCO perspective, all the way from your professionals within HR and the business interacting with that solution to your employees also. Do you want to drive employees down a route of self-service or manage self-service? And also other things as well, do you want a single solution that could incorporate many parts, like for example time and attendance, Mel, as well? Do you want that to be integrated, or are you looking at something on a larger scale where you need to procure something that's best of breed? So a very clear vision of what you want is key moving forwards.
Okay, we have something around. Oh, sorry, Adele.
Sorry, I was just going to also add, it's something we've been caught out with in software selections in the past, few years is around the security requirements and the increasing topic of encryption. So yeah, that I think for anyone going through that process to also make sure that that's covered, because otherwise you end up just having to reinvest in new solutions, which is obviously costly, and actually transitioning clients from one software to another often is a bit of a challenge in itself. So we've kind of feel now that's kind of one of our top priorities in assessing any softwares that we select going forward.
Yeah, and that's encryption of data, isn't it, Adele, for both in transit and at rest as well, which are both equally key.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
So we've had a question, I think, along those lines. So how are you managing quality control and information security while working from home? Obviously, this is a topic that a lot of people are discussing at the moment. Gary or Adele, you or James?
Yeah, so from a business continuity, we've obviously had those enabled across all of our staff. So the access to systems, etc., it still follows the same protocol. We have had you have assessments, so visually at home you have to provide evidence of your working space. There's continual requirements around reminders around security. We haven't seen an increase in data breaches, etc., from doing the work from home. And actually it was a massive challenge, but the way that the team have embraced working from home and become teams, from a quality and service, we may have had some blips somewhere, but in quite a lot of countries we've actually seen an improved service. And again, I don't know if that's to do with maybe an increase in employee engagement, because it is fundamentally enabled TMF to become more of a flexible worker. But yeah, I would say quality and service has been, it's been fairly stable. And from a data security, it's been largely driven by our IT teams and business continuity. But yeah, we've been okay. But again, if somebody has got specific questions on that, I can obviously engage with our technology team and we can give you more details.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We're just coming towards the end of today's session, so thank you to all of our speakers today. I just want to say that we had a nice post on the chat with one of your clients who said that you've done a fantastic job over COVID and given them so much advice. So, well done on that, and it's great to hear from one of your customers. So we have got another session next week. Everyone, if you could just go on to the next slide if possible. We will be sending out the slides and the recording, which I said at the beginning, but we've also had a couple of people ask, so we will get that over to you. And I'll also provide the details for our session, which will be next week on the, I keep saying it's the 3rd and it's not, because that's today. Yvonne, have you got the slide that you could just move over?
Yeah, I think it's the 9th.
There you go. 9th, thank you, because the 3rd is today. So we've got the next session on the 9th at 2 p.m, HR and Payroll, Navigating Complex Requirements in Turbulent Times. So I will send a message out to all of you after this session with the details of how you can download the slides and also what's the recording for today. If anybody has any further questions, feel free to contact myself or any of the team. Are you happy for people to link in with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Fab. Okay, so you can contact the team directly through LinkedIn, but thank you once again, all of you. Is there anything that you want to add before we leave? No, all good. Okay, well thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you all next week as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mel.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.